Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael. And today we are excited to have on the show our first Canadian paranormal team, two sisters from British Columbia, and it's Gina Armstrong and Victoria Vancek of Haunted History, BC. They are paranormal researchers, published authors, and historians residing in British Columbia, Canada. And today we're going to be getting to know them and talking about cryptids. So we're really excited about that. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in again. We're really happy to have you guys here. We've got one more guest this month, which is our good friend, Reverend Jim McGrath. He'll be on next week, and he'll be talking about how Christian symbols have been used to support violence and oppression. So he's not a real fan of that. So it should be a fascinating episode with him. And then we're planning shows for September and October. We're going to have plenty of our paranormal people on still. So join us for all the stuff ahead of us. Find out all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. While you're there, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi if you can afford to, because it helps a little with our production costs and so forth. And if you know anyone you think might make a great guest, let us know. We're always looking for some new people, and I'm excited to have these guys on today. It's going to be an awesome show. I'm really looking forward to it. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'm going to kick it back to you, Krista. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And welcome, Gina and Victoria.
Hi there.
Hi. How are you?
Great. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, we're really excited to be here.
Yeah, we definitely are.
Especially live. It's always fun to go, to be live.
We love live, even with the blips and blops. It's actually more exciting for us too. And we're hoping we often get people on chat, and that's one of the things we want to encourage people to join in. And we do get that on the shows.
Oh, great. Sure. Well, we're really looking forward to it. Yeah, so definitely. It will be fun to chat. That's for sure.
So let's start a little bit with, it's always good to get a bit of a background for our new guests. And I was curious about when each of you first encountered the paranormal in your lives in a meaningful way. So either of you can take it and run with it, that question.
Okay, so I'm Victoria here. Actually, I think it was when we were really young, maybe roughly 11, 12, 13 years old. We were quite intrigued by all the time the paranormal. And I think as kids, you have a fascination for ghosts all the time and ghost stories. So I think probably around that time, we just dabbled in all that sort of stuff. We loved the movies, books. And at that time, I think it was we were 13, 14 years old. We started running our own seances in our basement. And obviously they were rigged at the time because we didn't pay too much attention to the seriousness. And we did a good job really freaking people out. Our friends just ran for cover all the time, and we were really good at it.
It was fun.
So, but me personally, I know that even now up until this point, I haven't had really anything, I would say, earth-shattering that happened to me. But I remember earlier on, Krista and I, when we were discussing this, we were talking about how something that was very profound, probably now in the last 2 years when we've been visiting sites and locations, there have been some situations that we could not really, I would say, explain. And I would say that that was probably for me, as an adult, probably I could say I have come across something. But Gina, you were a little bit younger, right?
Yeah, I would say maybe 8 or 9 years old. Yeah. And that was the very first time at the moment, I didn't know that it was anything paranormal, but I woke up one night and the room was filled with sort of these little staticky little lights. And, you do the pinching and all that kind of stuff to make sure that you're awake and all that. So I don't know. I'm still kind of waiting to hear somebody, hopefully one day having a similar experience, because I don't know what it was. It was sort of filled with static, and in my mind, I would tell like those things or whatever that to like form a shape, and they would form a shape like a circle, a tree. And I know 100% I was awake. So, and of course, as time goes on, you sort of kind of forget about it, and you think, okay, well, there has to be something. I had to be a dreaming, or I had to be something, but that is something that I can't really explain easily. And I haven't heard a similar experience. I know I've heard about
static,
like staticky people or shadow people that look like static, but not really like a whole room full of like these little lights. And they were like almost like if you saw snow, like that was the best way to describe it. They were just kind of floating around the room. But yeah, so that was the earliest experience I remember having. And then after that, I would say, yes, just the last few years, since about 2017, we've been going into spooky locations, and we've had some very interesting, we've heard voices, we've had things sort of fly through the air. We've heard one of the most recent places we've been to, I was kind of in the back of the house. It's an old sort of a Tudor style house, and we were in the back kind of taking our photos, because we usually take extensive photos of the outside. And inside, I swear I saw somebody go from like left to right in the big window, like there's a big bay window. And I thought, well, we better get inside, because it looks like they're in there getting ready for us. And I saw a guy kind of walk past. And so earlier on too, we thought we heard voices when we first were taking pictures of the front door, and we just assumed somebody was in there. Well, when we rang the doorbell, nobody was answering. We thought, well, maybe there's nobody there. So I ended up calling the guy who was supposed to meet us, and he was like 5 minutes away. So there was actually nobody physically in the house. And then afterwards, we got some interesting photos, and
well, even me as well, when I was walking through the hallway,
yes,
I kept thinking I saw something from the corner of my eye. And typically, most of the time, you would capture something that's always on, like I would say, on a photo. But I was literally seeing things just in person,
like your naked eye, like you were trying to take a picture, and you saw like light flitting.
And it was until when you took a photo of me that I actually had like an orb above me. And it was kind of actually quite fascinating. It was a little eerie at first too, because there was one distinct photo that Gina took of me as I was looking at the architecture.
Like the light fixture you were just kind of zeroed in on.
Exactly. And there was what appeared to be like a chair that was, I think, that had like a little girl or something sitting there.
It looks like that.
And it looked almost like sort of like it was wispy looking, and the little girl looked like in a period clothing.
Yeah, we'll have to send it to you guys.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I have to say that kind of was a little bit mind-blowing and a bit eerie too, because we've been walking through this building thinking nothing of it. And we thought, well, it's got a lot of, interesting history. Obviously, we've heard stories about, the place. There's a lot of movies being filmed over there, movie crews coming in, and but we thought nothing of it until we started reviewing our photographs. And I have to say that just was recently this year. So I have to say that was really
a couple months ago. And even still, even though you sort of want to believe in things and you still try to explain it away. I don't know if it's human nature or just our logical side of our brain saying, oh, it's got to be like a trick of the light, or it's got to be something. But sometimes you do capture things that you really can't explain, and you hear things that you can't explain. And so
that's true. That's what's cool about photography. And also it's so much easier to do a lot of pictures. I've caught things like in flames before, and I didn't even see them when I was taking the picture, and it was only because I was actually focused on the person holding the candle. And I thought you never know with pictures what you really can capture, I think. Unfortunately, it's also easier to fake nowadays things. That's one of the arguments about, trusting any video and photography footage. So, but I agree with you. It's like, you can capture things that you don't expect. I did want to mention or say something about the seances, and that seems to be the gateway drug to the paranormal.
It does.
I mean, so many people have a story about seance. It's at least for girls. I don't know if it's the same. Maybe, I don't know. All the girls I knew, we were all into it like in third grade,
Absolutely.
And we were all just regular kids, it wasn't like we were in, a pagan family or something you might expect. And it was like, I've heard it from so many people. So I thought that was kind of funny,
Yeah, we didn't have a Ouija or anything like that at the time. But since then we've done like legit seances where we've gone with friends, and then you go to a historic location. And some places have allowed us to do like an authentic Victorian seance, which has been really cool. And we've had some experiences. So It is something when you know, in our last one, we were sitting in a house and we were doing it. 3 of us had our hands on it. It was me and 2 other people that were with us. And one of them was the museum worker herself. So she said, well, can I partake as well? So we kind of let her, but yeah, even the planchette on the Ouija board kind of jumped a little. So that was a little kind of funky. When we had our fingers on it, it just kind of, you know, did a little jump, and we thought, oh my God, you know, everybody of course freaks out, takes their hand off of it and goes, you know.
Yeah, it is weird when that happens. I don't know what it is. It's just weird, you know, because I've seen that too.
Cold spots, and we got some interesting answers to things.
So the tobacco smell. Remember the cherry tobacco smell.
So that was kind of interesting too. But yeah, and you never know if it's like the actual house or the things that the period items that people donate and bring in, because a lot of museums don't have necessarily artifacts all that are you know, come with the house, but there's people who donate things and they end up in there. So you never know, there could be like random attachments hanging around.
That's
what
true.
We like doing too, what we like to do as well is bring other groups in who have slightly different skills as well and slightly different interests, and that's where we learn a lot, but also we can collaborate and share. And it's really cool if one person's more into writing books, others are doing the paranormal investigation, and that's what happened with us.
And they usually have
people,
and they usually have better equipment too, because we have our handheld stuff, but we don't have like cameras. We don't have like, you know, all the bells and whistles. Some of our friends have some really good equipment. They have drones and they have, you know, all kinds of stuff. Where you
that is good.
So,
you got drones.
So it's kind of nice when we can go with somebody who's into the gadgets, because not that we wouldn't want to be into them, but I just don't have the patience for technology, I guess, if you want to say that. Like, you know, we have our EVP, like our EMF readers and our, you know, REM pods and like handheld stuff. So that seems to work well. And your intuition, you can't forget about that.
Absolutely. Because that's your radar, you know, that helps you make decisions moment to moment. So I totally agree. So let's get into this topic, because I know we're both excited about cryptids. I used to think they were called cryptoids. For the longest time, I've called them cryptoids.
Yeah.
So like, oh, it's cryptids. I've been saying it wrong for 10 years. So, and they feature in your first ever magazine. I read all of the ones in the magazine, so I hope you bring up some of them in that one. And it's
we sure will.
We'll share this a little more at the end too. So, but what would you like to talk about in terms of the maybe just talk about first what it is, and according to you, a cryptid. How do you define a cryptid?
Well, I would probably say like a creature that's not in the mainstream of, you know, things that are classified today. Like, you know, you can all, you know, we all know like the, you know, cat type creatures, ape-like creatures and things, but you know, people seem to see things that are sort of hybrids of things, or things that don't look like anything else. Like, we didn't get into this part in our book, but you know, when people see things like skinwalkers or rakes, or oh my God, you see some footage and you think like, what the hell is that thing? And you know, really, there's nothing really explainable about that, and different cultures have different beliefs and you see different kinds of creatures and you think, well, you know, that's not anything that we can classify scientifically that we know of. So I would say it's some unknown thing.
Yeah, and it's definitely fascinating too to see across the board, like throughout the globe, the different cultures as well, seeing very similar things too as well. So it makes you kind of wonder that there might be something out there that hasn't been identified, but it's definitely a mystery, definitely.
Yeah, because it's before the internet and before people were sharing information in this way. But people historically, like in the 1800s, have seen things all over the world that could be similar. And, you know, there's even drawings on cave walls of people seeing things that they, you know, that we can't explain. So yeah, it's a fascination for sure. Like, you know, what is out there? Are there really things out there? And there's some evidence that says that there might be.
So in your area in British Columbia, what are some of the local cryptids that you have come across?
Oh, we have another one.
I'll start off with one in particular, because this one we've never talked about on other podcasts before. So Krista, this is your very first, I would say, unveiling of the Shuswati.
The debut.
Yes, the debut.
It's having its podcast debut.
All right.
And it's actually kind of both Gina and I would say both of us, like we were actually agreeing that it's one of our favorites because it's not as creepy.
It's a lot cuter.
It is fascinating. It's interesting. We live in the Pacific Northwest area, and just going southern, probably south interior, there's a place called Shuswap Lake. And that's probably about 4.5 to 5 hours away from us. So we're kind of more closer toward the Washington State border area.
Hmm.
Anyways, so in the Shuswap Lake area, there have been a lot of sightings of this Shuswagi, and it's basically a sea serpent. Probably the very first sighting was documented in about like 1904. So
Long
it goes
time
back
ago.
a long time. And it was an Aboriginal man that happened to supposedly capture this sea creature. And he described it as being probably about 30 to 50 feet long. And it was a bit furry and hairy looking, sort of like a bear. And apparently he killed it, sold off the pelt, and that's basically it on that side. And then after about in the 1970s, the sightings started creeping up again. People started noticing things in the water. And mind you, Shuswap Lake is not a very big lake. It's probably about 600 meters deep, roughly.
Yeah.
And but the thing is that people have noticed these sea serpents floating around, or something that looks like a sea serpent because of the length. So, and people who live there, it's a recreational area as well. Families gather
A lot
there.
of fishing, camping, just a lot of people frequent it for that. A lot of fishermen go there because there's a lot of good fish.
Exactly. So, you know, they're out there, and locals have noted back in 1970s, 1980s, seeing this thing that sort of looked like a bear, sort of kind of fuzzy, hairy, but really long. And I have to say, it kind of looked like a dolphin in some cases too.
Yeah, like the renderings of it.
Whale, and so, but people have spied them. They looked at them. They noticed them. They even were like with binoculars out on the water, and they happened to see things floating around. And there was this really cool documentary that they were talking about these guys who were filming. I believe it was the Guys with Flies.
Yeah, they're a local fishing
They're a local
group.
fishing group. Yeah, and they were filming a video, and they apparently saw something floating around, and they saw it with humps on it too, as well on the surface. And a lot of times people had noted that, and it's everybody who's been noticing those kind of things.
Yeah, similar reports. And there was like one lady who was walking past one day, and this was a few years earlier, like a decade earlier, and she was walking past when she heard something as she was walking her dog along the, along the waterfront, and she heard something splashing around. So she looked, and then she saw something super long too, and it had the humps, and she thought, well, what am I looking at? And she kept looking closer, and sure enough, it was something that was really long and was sort of like, they always describe like an undulating movement, so it's moving like, not like a log where you just see it just sort of randomly, uncontrollably just, being thrown down the river or something, but people see it, kind of diving under after the boat kind of clips it, and they see it sort of dive back under. But yeah, it's one that's been around for a while, it looks like.
It is. And it's kind of cool because like the adults and the kids seem to be sighting these things. And so, it keeps on going. And I think back in 2011, there was another story as well. Again, a group of people just happened to be vacationing there and happened to see something as well, and they couldn't explain it. So we often wonder if it might be a prehistoric maybe creature or something that still lives in the depths of the water there.
Seems possible. Also, it doesn't sound like it's very dangerous. It doesn't sound like people are being eaten by it or disappearing, their dogs disappearing.
Most of the creatures, are probably just curious.
Yeah. So that one I wouldn't mind meeting. That one, it seems like some of the ocean cryptids aren't all so scary other than they're big.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or lake, ocean and lake, I was thinking of some of the ocean things too. And then I was thinking about how, we call them all monsters, and maybe we need to rethink whether or not there are monster cryptids and non-monster cryptids.
Exactly. It's just the experience people have with them, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta keep that in mind. Exactly.
On a terror scale of what they look like, there's like cute cryptids, and then there's like creepy cryptids.
Yeah. So this is like a little water bear, but more like 50 feet long.
Right.
Yeah. And so people do kind of, and we have, of course, like in Okanagan Lake, there's the Ogopogo. Everybody's really familiar with that one. So there's always some good sea serpent sightings that have happened.
Yeah, but that's kind of probably one of my favorites because it's quite unique, and we haven't talked much about it. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, the furry element of it seams a little different.
Yeah, and they said like the back feet, sort of like with the pelt that was, in the 1900s, they said that the feet were sort of like big feet, like that, so something that would propel itself through the water. So that's why it didn't look like a typical bear. They said it was looking like the fur looked bear-like, but the feet looked like something that would be sort of paddling or swimming. So
Never know.
interesting.
So if anybody likes to visit British Columbia, check out Shoe Swap Lake.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There could be tourism with cryptids. I don't see why not. I mean, there is a little bit, people trying to go see the Loch Ness Monster. Maybe that's one of the most famous ones, but maybe they could do more.
Ontario as well. They've got one in Ontario, Muskrat Lake.
Muskrat Lake in Ontario.
Yeah, Mussy is actually well known there. They've got even a statue dedicated to him.
There's a festival for this. So people kind of come every year to find Mussy, but again, it's one of those ones where they've seen something in the water, and they said that things are kind of always surfacing, and people say that they've seen this sea monster, and people have said that people try to dismiss it like, oh, it's a sturgeon, or because there's other types of creatures that can be kind of longer, and people say it's an eel or it's something, but people say, oh no, but it didn't look like that. It doesn't look like a fish, or it doesn't. We all know what a fish looks like, and it's kind of not. It's not the same.
Yeah. Well, they're still discovering new species, so anything's possible.
There are, and there could be hybrid species. Like that's another thing that people don't really take into account, that there could be, a species where it could be bred with another type of creature.
Right. Now, what are the scarier ones for you that you have found through your research?
Ooh, well,
the Wendigo.
The Wendigo. Yeah,
that's the one I think you mentioned about.
Oh,
right?
yes, yes. The Wendigo.
Because,
yes.
You've discussed.
So this one, people are. This is an interesting one, because this one is not only in Canada, but it's been cited, or it is pretty common in other areas too. Well, not common, hopefully, but here we have one. Yes, that's, people say it's kind of a relative of Bigfoot, and it looks a little bit like a werewolf. And the Wendigo, he's supposed to be pretty horrifying. He's described as having like some human characteristics. He's supposed to be really, really tall, kind of sunken, just really towering, with sunken eyes, peeling skin. He occasionally has elk horns, so like a face of an elk and elk horns. So that really sounds creepy. Yeah. And other times people say he has like deer-like horns, and he appears really emaciated. Oh. Like he's really, really skinny, and he's kind of like looks really hungry. So that's one of the things that he's a cold weather creature. So that's the other thing. There's, they say that he's predominant in the cold weather and in the desolate parts of central Canada. Forests along the freezing paths, you kind of look for the starving Wendigo, because he's also looking for starving people. So he's going to eat starving people because he's starving? Well, he might eat starving people, but the other thing is he makes the starving people he possesses them, and that they are hungry for now human flesh. So that's the thing, is that, there's the tale of like people, said that it was like a kind of a cautionary thing about selfishness and, those types of things, and greed. But there was an actual story about 100 years ago in Alberta, in Fort Kent, Alberta. So in the 1920s, there was a doctor that moved there. And at the time, unfortunately, there was a huge smallpox outbreak. So everybody around him was sick, dying. In his own family, his wife did pass away due to smallpox. The townspeople said at that time he locked himself in a room for 3 days, didn't come out. But when he came out, he just no longer looked like a man. They said that he was emaciated looking. Looked like an animal. He looked like an animal. They said he resembled a wild animal. His face was described as like no longer human. He was like kind of hunched over, emaciated, and he was like emanating these guttural sounds. And so the last time they saw him was when he was, murdering the townspeople. Like for 3 days straight, he murdered the townspeople. And then the last of him that they saw was him running into the woods, and he just disappeared, and nobody ever heard from him again. So that's kind of creepy. They said he was sort of turned into the Wendigo type creature. And poor guy. Yeah. And oddly today, people still say that they hear strange, terrifying howls in those woods. Sightings.
Tourists are being also warned not to go near them.
And sightings at the edge of the forest. And then, and many people don't want to walk near the tree line. And they say that locals will often caution like out-of-town visitors after dark not to get too close to those woods, because there's something eerie about them, and there's spooky stuff in it. So
whoa, that is spooky.
That would be a creepy one.
That's very X-Files like.
See, I always heard about the Wendigo being more like a mythical spirit, right? Like an Aboriginal myth. But this thing about that, because actually Gina just uncovered that one. She discovered the story about the Alberta doctor.
Yeah, it was coming.
That was fascinating. I didn't even know that myself. So that puts a different spin now on the Wendigo.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you're both like historians as well, right?
We are, yeah.
So that seems to be one of the fascinating things that's happening with the paranormal is I mean, there's always been a historical nature, but it hasn't always been factual. I mean, whereas I've noticed more historians are getting involved in their communities and bringing the two together is really fascinating.
Yes. And we love that. We love doing that as well. Gina and I are both very well connected to the community. We love to volunteer as well, or just get involved with various things too. And
like the heritage sector, yeah. So we do a lot of work in and around there. So yeah,
with the events that they put on too. That's for sure. Yeah.
And have you found that let's say just tried and true historians are accepting of the paranormal side of you because you are historical, or do you find you have a little?
Oh no, I would say that we are, and especially evident with the fact that in May we actually won something called the BC Heritage Storytelling Award, and it was for our project. It was for BC
Legends and
Folklore, BC Folklore and Legends, and it was history, heritage, and haunting. So we explored like everything historically, the haunted side, the heritage side, and all the folklore that goes into, just your local communities, because we think it's important, whether it's true or not, to kind of preserve those things. Just
absolutely,
just so people can see, well, how did this even originate? If it's not a true story, then was it supposed to just scare people? Was it supposed to scare kids to like be careful of things? Like, a lot of times people made up stories of like cautionary things to kind of keep, kids away from certain areas or whatever it is. And just urban legends are kind of fascinating.
For sure. And all cultures have that. And it's really nice to make sure you keep a record and document that too. And I mean, even with Gina too, like she and I, when we decided to do this, we were always focused more on the history side of things. And then as we started delving deeper into like maybe stories about certain sites or cemeteries or buildings, there was always somebody who told us stories about, and they were either urban legends or ghost stories. And we were like, wow, this is fascinating. So we got to incorporate this. And as we start hearing similar stories that are linked to that same location, that kind of just sort of sets a red flag, because we think that that's something worth recording. Then
yeah, because it piques your interest in it. So then when we do go there, we do see if we can make contact with something, if our equipment does go off, or if there's any sort of energy about a place. Because I do believe that buildings and areas retain some sort of energy of the past. So it is, I think there is something valid to that too, that, is valid enough that you want to go and explore that possibility.
I love that. And I did want to bring up the most famous of the cryptids is, of course, Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And have you been on a Bigfoot hunt, or are you going to? Or
Yes, we have a little area in Pitt Lake, it's called. It's probably about 20 minutes from us, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour. And there, I would say probably the earliest Sasquatch sighting in Pitt Lake was around the 1930s, like 1933-ish or so, when people said, and there was logging camps there. So there was a logging group there, and they said they saw something. Some loggers said they, heard things, like things that were thrown at the inn that they were staying in and that sort of thing. So again, then several years later, 1965, loggers again had a unique experience encountering Bigfoot. They saw him long enough that they actually sketched him and recorded, his presence. Like he was in the woods, kind of, he was eating berries or something, and then before he slinked off, they both, were able to see him. So.
And about like 5 years later, like 1970, there was another record.
So there, people kept seeing things. Like another 9 loggers said that they were there. They heard something like a big boulder, like being thrown at the inn, which they couldn't explain. And then even more was that their equipment was flipped over.
Yeah.
So they got, they had like big, like bulldozers and things like that you wouldn't be easy to flip over, but they couldn't explain why their equipment was tampered with. So that was kind of something interesting. So yeah. And then I would say the other very interesting thing about that area is in the 1960s, when we were researching, we found that there were actual Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, that there were actual police reports about things that people said they saw, like UFOs. So they said that they described it in their report as a Sasquatch ship. So we do have a copy of that report in our book.
Yes, we do.
So
actually, I'm just
going to hold it up here. We have 2 pages, and one of them actually does kind of in quotes say, that people have seen, and it's underlined and in quotes, in big capital letters, Sasquatch, a spaceship as Sasquatch ship, and that they saw it in the sky. And as we know that many people who investigate cryptids, and especially Bigfoot, a lot of times it goes hand in hand with UFO sightings. And people even speculate, well, is he an alien creature? Is he really a cryptid?
From another dimension?
Yeah, is he from another dimension? Because people have things, time slips around Bigfoot, encounters. So there's a lot of different things that we were really fascinated to find, that there was actual like police reports about that, and that they typed those words even in there, because a lot of times, you wouldn't have somebody in like an authority type figure even putting that down on paper, because people would think you're nuts,
I know, and this report was back in 1960.
Yeah,
so that's not too long.
And there's a couple different, scenarios, and they say in the Pitt Valley, Pitt River area, and and then there was some hikers later on that were hiking through the area, through the Boise Valley. They were going up through Pitt Lake, and they heard like these horrible howls in the middle of the night, just as they were doing up their camp. You think most people would be deterred, but oh no, they decided in the morning, at the break of day, that they were going to go investigate. So they, supposedly came upon the Sasquatch, and he was like catching fish in the river. But
and see, for us, it kind of hits home, because we just live, just like Gina said,
I know,
a few minutes away, and like I live right in the Pitt Meadows area.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm pretty well in the heart of Bigfoot country.
And they say it's a migration route through there,
is.
like a migration route for the Sasquatch. So whether or not that's true, but there's a lot of other little myths and legends around that area.
Yeah,
there's
but they also see UFOs. There are sightings of UFOs in that area as well too.
Yeah, and those continue on. Like people still see things. So even when we talk to people, they said that there's just, you can tell that there's like somewhat of there's just something about that area that repeatedly has sightings over the decades, and they're all very similar. There's always like Bigfoot with UFOs. So who knows what's in that area and why?
I didn't know until fairly recently that there was a correlation between UFO and Bigfoot. Maybe through Ancient Aliens, because some of the shows about Bigfoot we were talking about earlier that aren't always true, but they still made Bigfoot famous. They don't have that angle as much. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, why do you think, in your opinion, Bigfoot has become kind of the representation of cryptids? If you think it's the most well-known, probably even more than like the Loch Ness Monster now, is that it's so popular in everywhere, Bigfoot.
Absolutely.
I just think that, the water is one thing, because not everybody goes out onto the water, and it's kind of hard to see things unless you spend a lot of time there. I think everybody sort of, at one point or another, either hikes, camps, or goes into areas where, there's woods, and there's a lot of woods that are very temperate. Like I think the climates, even though they vary, like the southern Bigfoots are different than like our northern ones, right? Because there's in Florida,
Florida as well.
Yeah, there's the skunk ape and all of that, but they're basically like in a temperate climate. And I think, that they're more accessible to people than other type of creatures, because like the other creatures that are, a little bit more geographically contained, I would say. But, Bigfoot is sort of everywhere, and people have had like there've been a lot of sightings.
It's a cultural phenomenon, basically.
I mean, there's whole like podcasts devoted to like Bigfoot sightings, and there's definitely a lot of them, and a lot of them seem very sincere. People are really freaked out. A lot of people say that they wouldn't go back to the areas.
And I think we really would like to actually see one, all of us at some point, those of us who are searching for Bigfoot. But at the same time, it would be kind of cool finally to discover if there is really something out there. It's the fascination, the mystery, I think. And I think that's human nature, really, to have that intrigue.
And he's also been caught, if you want to say caught on camera the most, if and the vocalizations have been caught, we've listened to some vocalizations, and man, they are not like anything that I could describe as being anything else. You hear them they're eerie and they're hollow sounding and they're terrifying. I mean, we kind of hope we get to hear one from afar one day. It'd be nice to come across, some strange howl. But yeah, I think it's been more captured than any other creature probably that's said to be out there.
But, it doesn't sound like Bigfoot has attacked anybody.
No.
So that's interesting. I mean, obviously a big animal could hurt you because they're big, but it's not like some of those other cryptids you were talking about earlier that would be likely to threaten you or kill you or, except for, of course, you could die of fear, I guess.
Yes. Well, and we hear that he follows people. Like people say that if they're in the woods and they're hunting, fishing, or doing whatever, and they're going through the woods, that they sort of feel like they're being like paralleled by him. Like he's sort of, keeping his distance, but he follows you type of a thing. So that's when they usually say, they don't feel right. They smell something or, whatever is happening, but they have been followed by Bigfoot. So I don't think,
well, we actually interviewed a lady. She told us a story about her going out with her family for a hike, and that was on the island. In fact, I think it was maybe Nanaimo or somewhere in Vancouver Island area. Mm-hmm. And she was saying the same thing, that they went for a hike, thought nothing of it. They weren't searching for Bigfoot. Nobody was thinking about Bigfoot. And all of a sudden they hear somebody behind them or someone walking just sort of in unison as every time they're walking. They stopped, it stopped. So they picked up and started walking again. And they're like, okay, again, somebody's like there. And they called out asking if there was anybody there. Nobody answered. But they did have a really weird feeling, like an eerie feeling being there. Yeah, and they felt like they were being watched possibly, or something like that. But and she just recounted the whole story, and she said that now, as a matter of fact, now she knows what we do, and we told her a little bit about cryptids. She's like, oh wow. Well, now she's got a different opinion of whether she wants to even go back there again.
That freaks people out. You mean there's other stuff out here?
We showed her some information, some pictures, and she's like, okay, well, maybe I'll think twice going there again.
One of our listeners has a question. They'd heard a legend of a young ape boy that was captured around Yale, BC. Do you guys know anything about that?
Yes. Yes, that was actually, in fact, I remember Jacko. Remember Jacko?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a theory behind that. Some people thought that possibly during the time when the circus rolled into town, somebody must have lost like an ape or chimpanzee or something. And but apparently it made in the news. I think it was in the Victoria Times. Mm-hmm. They did talk about it, and apparently I think it was some railway workers that chased it up a hill. And I believe it knocked its head and it passed out. And then just nobody really knows what happened to the body after that. But the news did point out that it was something unusual. It was an unusual creature. But yeah, Jacko.
Yeah, not really ape, but not really human, but somewhere in between, which is very fascinating.
And that was probably the late 1800s, early 1900s. I remember that story, yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. We were talking earlier that there are places in the world that you can't even get into. There could be creatures that we haven't met yet because it's, no one's lived there. No people have lived there, and it's dense and you can hide. Yeah. So anything's possible.
Yeah, totally inaccessible. Some areas we don't even know what type of creatures are behind the shrubs and trees there, but I'm pretty sure there are species that we haven't encountered yet, and they're waiting to be probably discovered. And that's why probably even with Bigfoot, probably I'm thinking the same thing. Maybe in the next few years, we might probably discover something.
Now, I was wondering, it seems like there should be smaller cryptids too. And I've never really seen anyone, I'm not a big expert on cryptids though, but I've never heard like in the public opinion, people talking about smaller sized cryptids. Have you come across anything that is like...
a little bit. Like people say that there have been like Bigfoot families, that they've seen young ones that look a little bit different than the older ones.
Different color, different size. Yeah. They might be maybe some are like junior, senior, some young ones. Yeah, so you never know.
Yeah, there might be something like that. And who knows, like when it comes to like smaller, let's say a sea serpent that's smaller, well, you would probably just mistake it for a fish or something logical, like unless it's huge and like
sturgeon.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
like if it's not huge and not attracting your attention, you'd probably think it's just logically something that we are familiar with. So I
That's
think
true. You'd probably write it off with it.
yeah, like the smaller ones wouldn't really catch your eye because you think, oh, it's just a big fish, or it's a, because there are like giant oarfish that can be like 40 or 50 feet long, and they're kind of like very eel-like, and they sort of swim like that. So people kind of think like,
But even
it
in
could be that.
Florida, right? Like the skunk ape, some of them are tall, some of them are short, some of them are only 4 foot, 5 foot tall. So I'm not sure. Yeah, it just depends, I guess, probably what type of species, or maybe some sort
Yeah.
of, I don't know.
And
maybe.
like the lizard man, he's not very tall.
No, he's not.
So
No.
we have something called the Canadian lizard man. So we do read about him.
So South Carolina's not the only one with their lizard man. I read up on that one.
Yeah.
No, Canada has their very own, and here in British Columbia
yeah,
too.
so Thetis Lake on the island.
Gina's favorite cryptid.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. Well, because I think I imagine them like the creature from the Black Lagoon. Like if you ever seen that movie, like he doesn't run. Like he's pretty slow. So I think you could outrun him if you saw him. But so we have the lizard men. So people say that they've seen this sort of lizard-like creature. It started in the 1970s. There was a report in the Victoria Times Colonist. So it was a local paper that reported that there was these 2 kids who had a sighting. Like they had this experience where it apparently chased them. One of the kids said that the claw even scratched him, and they made up this story about, this lizard man. So a couple days later, the RCMP actually went out and they did the police, the local police, they went out and did an investigation because they thought, hey, this sounds kind of legit. So we're going to go look, to see what happened. And one of the kids eventually did admit to that it was a hoax and that he made it up. But
However,
oddly,
there were some couple guys too as well. Shortly after the sighting,
yes, they were fishing.
They were fishing, and they happened to see as well something that was creeping up from the water.
They said it walked out of the water, and they said, oh my God, we saw it walk out of the water. It looked around, and then they said that they ran after that because they saw this lizard come out. So, people kind of thought, oh, well, what could it be? Well,
and
lo and behold.
Theories as well.
Yeah, because there was a guy who then, because he read all about that, said a year prior he had lost his pet tegu lizard. And I guess a tegu lizard is a lizard that's fairly large, like it can grow like to 4.5 feet.
South American species.
Yeah, they're kind of a large aggressive species, so it could probably stand up on its hind legs because lizards do that. But he said a year before that he lost him. So what kind of baffled zoologists was that, well, it was a South American cold-blooded lizard that probably wouldn't survive the Canadian waters or the river. So, or I mean the winters. So they were kind of perplexed as to why it would still be around like a year later. Like you could see if you just lost it maybe in its summertime or something. But yeah, they said that it probably likely wouldn't have survived that long. But that kind of, that sort of was the logical explanation, which could have been a possibility. Could it adapt? I don't know, maybe. Animals are great at adapting to things and environments.
However, there was a sighting of one just back in 2011.
Yeah, 2011. There was more campers who had just gone out on a food run. They went to the store. When they were coming back, they said on the shore, they saw this something that looked like a small boat, and it just looked like the lizard creature that just scurried back in when they sort of approached. So,
and there were a couple campers as well. They had a cabin, and they apparently saw something on their porch as well. And it was coming out, I think, out of the water, and it was feeding on cat food.
Oh, the cat food on the porch. So it's like a lizard thing.
Exactly.
So, who knows? Maybe true, maybe not true. I don't know. But the lizard man sort of has his own little nook.
Yeah.
It's a great concept idea anyway, something about a lizard man. I like that, idea.
Exactly.
Yeah, the what was it, the Black Lagoon movie? I remember the poster mostly from that.
Oh yeah, no,
that was really cool.
I love those movies because I love all the old black and whites.
It's so dramatic.
They're creepy, but but you just never know what's in there. So.
No, you don't. I mean, it's funny that one started out as a hoax, but then there was a reality too. So that one's kind of interesting that way.
Yeah, and there were kind of groups of people who saw him. So they were like, okay, the verdict's still sort of out on all that. So yeah, but you just never know about those things. So
no, that's true.
It's true.
Now you cover in your magazine, you covered about 7. I just wanted to give a shout out to that. Evening in Avenues, Hauntings in the Outskirts. It's your first volume 1, and you have beautiful pictures. And I also like the story about the Vancouver Police Museum. That whole long story was great. But you have a great section on the cryptids in there, that there's some that we haven't talked about on the show that I totally encourage people to get a copy of it. And by the way, where can they get a copy?
That you can find on our website. You can go to hauntedhistorybc.com and just look under our sub-menu shop, and you can see all the list of the bookstores that carry our products there. So.
And you can just email us too.
Yeah.
A lot of our sales, I will probably list it on Amazon probably like the second week of September or so, but I just didn't want to put it out there quite yet. I mean, Amazon takes a lot of money from people who create stuff. So I will put it out there before the Halloween time and everything, before spooky season. But yeah, just email us so we can do hauntedhistorybc@gmail.com, and we have PayPal so you can pay. We ship it to you. So we will be, we most of the time I like $5 for shipping, or sometimes for free if it's somewhere where it doesn't cost very much. So yeah, just kind of look us up and let us know.
I'm curious as to what inspired you to create this magazine, because that's a lot of other kind of work and not everybody will take the time to do it. So what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so it's interesting because Gina and I were mulling over the idea of writing a book in the first place. And this was about 2.5 years ago, really. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of photographs and we thought, how are we going to incorporate these beautiful photographs into just maybe a hardcover book, we thought, maybe like a coffee table book. But then we thought, well, that might be a little too much. Then we thought to ourselves, maybe a novel, but I don't know how that would work with a paperback. So we got the idea about a possible magazine. And the cool thing was, it's a hybrid, basically. It's like a coffee table book and a magazine.
Yeah. We started looking too we thought, okay, well, there's a few UK ones. There's an Australian paranormal magazine. There's several in the States, but there was nothing Canadian. So we thought Canada needs to have its very own Canadian paranormal magazine, just dedicated to things. And over time, we will probably feature like guest writers. We do feature some people in there, kind of like did their little ad page, and people that we worked with. So, and we will have interviews in there as well. So yeah, no, it's been great. It was just a better way to showcase everything we wanted to showcase. Mm-hmm. Plus we have so many locations, to put it all in one book would have been huge and just a big undertaking. So this way we have a lot more to write about. So we're working on volume 2 currently. Yeah. So hopefully there will be a cover reveal sometime in October. So,
excuse me. And so how often do you plan on putting it out, or are you doing that sort of by, feel right now?
A couple a year. We're hoping, hoping that one. We've got like 6 issues already planned. So the covers are all designed and everything. So we're just kind of
content's already mapped out.
Yeah, we've got outlines of like what the themes will be behind them. So yeah, we're just working away. So the second volume should be out sometime in November, early December, something like that.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'm so excited. And the other thing I wanted to share with you is that on the show, Michael and I have made a point to bring on women in the paranormal because they are underrepresented in the media. So that's how I found, Michael found Spook Eats, Amanda, and I found Mystic Mittens through Instagram, and we've made it a point. So we're happy that you can join into that. And again, we also have Craig, who's a man who's in the paranormal, but we wanted to support that idea a lot. So you're part of that.
Well, we really appreciate it.
Yeah,
for sure. We sure do. Just the exposure. It's fun to talk about stuff. There's a lot of very talented women, non-binary paranormal investigators that are out there doing their thing. And yeah, TV just shows you a very small slice of who's out there doing this stuff. So you always see like the typical, male-run teams and everything. But yeah, there's a lot of people that are very creative in what they're doing. So it's really nice to have this platform and platforms like the Feminine Macabre, of course, and
yeah, and we want diversity. In general, nature likes diversity, and why should we not like that too? So on the show, we try to support as much diversity as we can, though sometimes we can't get people from other, I've tried certain, so you just keep kind of trying, but there are way more women in the paranormal, been doing it for a long time than I realized because of connecting to women in the paranormal, whether it's through the Feminine Macabre or some of the guests we've had on telling us their stories. And that was really exciting to me because I don't know, for me, I've been involved in metaphysics and therefore the paranormal since I was a teenager. And I just didn't know there were so many people, parallel doing it too for many, many decades, So it's really kind of exciting for me to find that out.
Well, they said that one of the first women investigators ever was Catherine Crowe in the 1850s. So she was the one writing about ghosts, and way before a lot of other people were writing about ghosts and supernatural topics. So
and the Fox sisters as well too.
Well, yeah,
their seances.
Yeah. And I did want to mention one of my favorite things you did in your magazine, and also your logo with the crow corner. Michael and we have a very, very close connection to crows, and I was just really touched that you gave that homage to the crow. We've rescued crows, and we have a rescued crow that's 21 years old. And so we have a very strong fondness for them. And so I was like very touched at the end. Is it the crow?
That's Onyx the crow.
Yeah, and people were like, oh, she's actually real, because they heard us sort of talking about her. But yeah, she hangs out at Victoria's house. So she's a regular all the time. And we're always going to have, every magazine will have a little bit of crow corner.
There'll be a little bit of crow all the time.
All the time. So we that'll be a page that will go on in each volume. There'll be something about, that particular crow, and just crows in general. Very mystical birds.
They are, and they are very beloved by people in the paranormal. I mean, they definitely have a love-hate energy. I know, like, someone came on my page once, we'd rescued a baby crow, and I was just talking about it, and we take them now to someone else to rehabilitate it because we can't do it. And I was just showing a picture and going on about it, and this woman came on and was just so horrible, saying, these birds are horrible, they kill, and I'm like, yeah, so do eagles.
Yeah,
seagulls and eagles.
Well, it's just the way of the natural world, right?
Yeah,
So
they're not worse, and there's so many incredible things about them. But the ones that love crows, they love them enormously. But I've noticed the paranormal world definitely has adopted the crow.
Yeah, and if you guys ever want to look at social media, there's a page dedicated to crow called Canuck the Crow. And this fellow had him for the longest time, and they just had the most incredible bond. There's a documentary, and his Instagram is Canuck and I. And so he posts pictures of, since then, Canuck has either disappeared or died or whatever. But, it was just recently, I think 2018 or something, he disappeared. But he had this crow forever. And I mean, it was like the closest crow person relationship I've ever seen. I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah, we follow it. I know the whole story of that, Yeah,
nice.
I remember when it first came out, and Canuck with the knife, and so yeah, it is amazing. But to be honest, there's a lot of people that, more than you realize, that have very close relationship with crows. Once you, there's a Facebook site that's called For the Love of Crows. And then people that have rescued it, once you kind of have them in your life, it seems like the door to all of that opens. I didn't know so many people had connections to wild crows and also rescued crows, and the little girl that gets the gifts, from the crows somewhere in the Northwest, the crow that leaves her jewelry and things because they feed the birds there, she and her mother. So they seem to be really social and interactive with people if people want it.
Absolutely.
When we're on location.
It's funny you should say that, because earlier on, when we were thinking of how we're going to do this, when we designed Haunted History BC, Gina and I were just thinking and wondering, what's going to be our mascot? What are we going to do? What kind of brand are we going to create? And we just wanted, one day we were thinking, hey, let's maybe use the symbol of a crow. And we thought maybe we should go take pictures of a crow, see if we can capture some cool shots. Well, lo and behold, Onyx decides to come visit me. So she comes to my place and she visits me right on my porch over there, and she goes on the railing and she just sits there and it just, hangs out with me for like hours on end.
You got a photo shoot.
I usually do a photo shoot with her. So sometimes she looks great. Sometimes she doesn't want to get pictured, but that's fine.
But in the snow, you've got snow crow
I've
pictures.
got pictures of her in the snow during the rain, and like it just throughout all seasons basically. And it's really cool. But she comes and visits, so I technically will say that she has adopted us.
Yes.
That does seem to be the case with crows.
Yeah.
She comes and hangs out, like when I'm there too. She perches on the rail or whatever. So we're like, oh, there she is.
And she's not noisy. She doesn't call when she doesn't have to. She just hangs. That's it. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you sort of one sort of broader question too. We're getting close to the end, but you'll have time for this. Is sort of, where do you personally both see sort of the paranormal world going, like in terms of your experience? Do you feel like more people will be open to it? What are your thoughts about that?
I think more people are going to be open and are open to it. I think when they see people doing legitimate work on the paranormal, and it's, it's not just lurking around darkened hallways with your digital recorder. I mean, there's a lot of research. There's a lot of talking to people. If you want to do it right, there's a lot of repeat visits, like to the same location. So extremely time consuming. So it's not anything where it's just, fun and games necessarily. You see some goofy shows out there at times, but there are some legitimate, people doing some really good work there. Yeah. So hoping that sort of is more the direction that it will go, instead of like the sensationalized stuff. Yeah, the more of the things that you're doing, we're doing, women in the feminine macabre are doing. So things like that. There's a lot of people doing some legit investigating and research that is really fascinating, to just adds to the knowledge, and the
definitely is growing. Definitely, the knowledge and the interest is growing there. And I'd like to I also noticed too that you don't have to, even if you get into this field, you don't have to necessarily think that you have to always keep recording something. I mean, we see the shows all the time, walking away with some documents and information and some sort of activity all the time. But that's not always the case. You go to a place, if you're an investigator, don't be discouraged. Don't think that you walked away with nothing just because you don't have any information or you haven't recorded anything. There's a lot of history involved in maybe the site you've been in, and maybe just do some research there. You might find some cool stuff there, just in general, just that ties with the history. You don't always have to have spooky stories. Yes.
Yeah, the appreciation of the actual location. Yeah. Like you said, you mentioned our photos. Well, that's one thing that we like to also showcase, is like the beautiful photography. There's a lot of good, fantastic architecture.
To convey the atmosphere.
Yeah, there's a lot of, we live in a great part of the world where the woods and the lakes are beautiful. So, there might be a spooky story, but your whole experience is what we're really sharing, and hopefully taking people along on our adventures. And, they get to see kind of what we do. There's not always a ghost involved, but there's always for sure a great location involved. So that's one thing we can count on.
Well, history can be haunting in many ways, not simply through, and there's always mysteries, like you said, even with regular history. And when you start digging and looking for the real history of a place. And I'm glad that people are interested in that.
In people's lives, like the people who used to be at the locations, or people who resided on the land before, there's a lot of fascinating cultural things that happen, and, just that we should know about.
But we learn as well as we research. We think, so we go down a certain path, and then we're like, oh wow, we didn't know this. So we're educating ourselves as we go, which is really a lot of fun.
And you see how everything's connected. So that's the thing. When you start digging into history of a local area, you find like the people who started up a certain shop, like in another city, there was like another family member
the cemeteries.
The cemeteries, exactly, all the pioneers. And you start to see how it's all interconnected, and how we can sort of be part of sharing the story, and we can be part of the story as well. Right. So that's kind of our hope going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point about being part of the story as well, by retelling the story and finding new things out about stories we already know. That's also part of history.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
So thank you both for being on the show. I'm so happy to meet you through Zoom. I mean, that's as close to in person as I can get right now. And Again, I'm really appreciative of Amanda's work because she's helping me to connect with all kinds of people too through her journal.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah. Someday we hope to meet some of these people in person. I would love to meet.
We'll have to have some kind of a big conference somewhere central.
I think we should go somewhere central, somewhere cool where we all kind of get to meet up. Yeah,
that would be a lot of fun. I would love to do that.
It would be.
So thank you, and I'm sure we'll have you on again. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today for our show. Join us next time as we continue to research the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a great week.